Hello and welcome to A Light Chat, a short interview series talking about all things relevant to lighting. Our resident expert with over 30 years in the business is Frank Grobmeyer. Today's special guest is from Glantz, originally founded as a sign painter supply company in 1906. The Glantz business has evolved over the century. As the world changed, lighting and electrical solutions became an integral part of it. Tom Grunwald, Director of Sales for Glantz, is here to share his perspective on the adapting to changes in the industry. Let's get talking. Tom, thanks so much for joining us today.
Well, appreciate the opportunity. Thanks for having me.
So tell us a little bit about your background and who you are and what you do for Glantz.
Well, I'm the Director of Key Accounts and Sales, covering basically the Midwest. Prior to that, I was handled lighting for Glantz across the entire U.S., covering training and so forth. About 7 years ago, Glantz brought me on board. And while they've always been involved in lighting, at that point, their lighting for the sign industry was more so, for example, I'll say the marquee type stuff, the S14 lamps that would flash or chase or whatever. And staying on top of technology, Glantz saw what the future was going to hold as far as retrofitting, as LEDs became more and more efficient and so forth. And so that's kind of what I moved into at that point. And of course, as you know, now we're lighting up stuff on Times Square with LEDs and lighting up the side of huge buildings on the Vegas Strip with LEDs. So we've came a long way.
Well, Glantz has actually touched, their fingerprints are kind of all over every different light source throughout the years, because they transitioned to the electronic, from the standard signs to electronic signs, message centers, channel letters, and then they transitioned to the whole neon phase, the LED beginning stage, which if you were in the sign industry back then, the early LEDs, it was a rough area, because you had diodes going out and hot spots and signs, and then transformer. It pretty much touched every area of lighting over the years. And that's why it's interesting to talk to you and figure out, how did you guys stay up on technology over the years through all these various stages and all these various transitions?
Well, I think it's a matter of keeping your pulse on the industry and what's going on. And as you mentioned and so forth, we've came such a long ways just in the past 4 or 5 years with LEDs, the technology. Optics has came so far, not only from the LED and the LED modules that are used in channel letters, but again, the optics that we use in site lighting or floodlights. And so I think that's the most important thing.
I have a question, actually. Given that you're a sign company and your roots really stem from being a sign company, what are the largest challenges when it comes to lighting signs versus, say, lighting a building or a parking lot?
I think the biggest thing there is depending on the effect that they're trying to get. And sometimes that gets to be a challenge. And quite honestly, those are the projects that are real fun. And the other thing is that you see them on paper, and you've got it all figured out in your head that that's where it's going to be. But then when you actually see the end project, it's kind of like, wow, we did that. We had a project on Interstate 15 between Las Vegas and LA, and it was an ice cream and candy shop. They had an old water tower on their property, and they decided to make that water tower a huge ice cream cone.
Ooh.
And so if you would, the top tank of that water tower was the big swirl of the ice cream cone. And we had to internally illuminate that to make it look like it was vanilla ice cream. And quite honestly, it turned out really good. It's a fun project.
The just day-to-day business that I find interesting is that you guys are still dealing with S14 lamps and old message centers that you're just, time and temp boards you're trying to maintain. And so you pretty much still have to, your younger people that jump into the business aren't just learning LEDs. They've got to learn the older technology too, so that they can keep up on, just the supply.
Very true. And I think it doesn't necessarily just happen on the lamp side of it, like you say, for the S14s and the message centers and whatever, but we kind of touched on it earlier. And that's the neon. And you know what, while there's LED flex neon that is becoming very popular in the industry right now, there's still some diehards out there that want that look of the original neon. And so there are still a small handful of shops that specialize in neon, and that's a completely different technology, and unfortunately kind of a dying art also as being a neon vendor. But so yeah, anybody new coming into the industry, like you say, they have to not only know the side of LEDs, but some of them have to learn the older side of it. And I can attest to the fact that sometimes I do get some calls from some of the younger ones and say, I don't have a clue what they're talking about here. What's, what is this? And it's kind of like, well, all right, I know what it is, but are you calling me because you're saying I'm old? And LED fixtures, the luminaires have came down enough in cost now that it's almost more efficient to swap out the entire luminaire as opposed to doing that retrofit kit. That LED fixture was actually designed to work with the LEDs as opposed to putting an LED, component inside of a fixture that was designed for metal halide. Or let's take it the opposite way and say it's kind of tough to put a 400 horsepower engine in a Volkswagen.
True.
So.
Some people do it though.
That's true.
What do you think some of the bigger, more dramatic changes in LED lighting coming around the bend are?
There are LEDs out there right now that are on the market that are doing 140 and higher. LEDs are going to become so energy efficient that, yes, we're going to be saving huge amounts of energy. There are some fixtures out there that it makes more sense to say spend a couple of $100 and put up a new fixture that maybe has a 10-year warranty, as opposed to spending an hour to an hour and a half in labor doing something, when you're 40 feet up in the air in a bucket truck and trying to replace that thing. And so then you have to look at it. And we do have some customers right now that they are pushing very strongly to no longer retrofit the luminaire, but they're saying replace the entire fixture. It's just with the warranties that are involved, and you look at labor, it's much easier and much quicker to just go out in that bucket truck and take a new fixture up with you and put it on the pole, as opposed to take everything apart and try to put more components in it.
Thank you to Tom Grunwald for joining us today on a light chat. Tom, you can be found at the Glantz website at nglantz.com, correct?
That's correct, yes. And here to reach out if you have any questions, need some help on whatever, and on those unique projects, I'm more than willing to offer up my expertise, or I know a lot of experts in the industry that same old story. If I don't know, I'll find out. So.
Great. Well, thanks so much for that guidance. We appreciate it, Tom.
Thanks,
Sure.
Tom.
Thank you so much for joining us for today's episode of A Light Chat. Subscribe to the Natural LED YouTube channel for future episodes. We look forward to seeing you soon.